Alright, I am back with another video, and I have a question for you. Are you afraid of being watched without your knowledge? The idea that at some point, at any point in time, your actions, your things you do, the things you say, are being recorded and kept by someone. And not just, the things you do online, but the things you do in real life. Somebody out there who knows, without your knowledge, the route you take to work every day, your favourite place to get something to eat, your favourite shop to do your weekly shop at, all of these things. How afraid would you be to learn that someone knew everything about you, even the most minute details, and you never even knew that that person ever existed? That is this build today, or at least the kind of backstory that I've come up with for it, because we are building what I am calling the Observer, a very knowledgeable, stealthy character whose whole shtick is recording knowledge about people, and then selling that knowledge on to various different clients. Now, this build, mechanically at least, came about from me wanting to combine two subclasses that I've never combined before, as well as the fact that I wanted to make use of some subclasses that I haven't used in a long time. And the end result, at least from a lore perspective especially, but from a mechanical perspective as well, actually ended up being very interesting, at least to me. I'm really happy with how this build turned out, and I think the unique combination that we're going for here, I think a lot of you are going to like. But without further ado, let's kind of get into it. The idea of this build is meant to be a stealthy character that is good at various different, kind of intelligence and wisdom checks and such like that. A very intelligent character who's able to kind of play a supportive role, but also be a front-facing damage dealer when need be. So this is definitely someone you're going to be wanting to slot into a party of balanced characters, like most of my builds, although most of my builds can stand on their own pretty well. This build, while it can still do that, there are certain encounters where it will struggle, and as such, you do need to take that into account. Otherwise, with this build, I think the combination that I've gone for here is very, very interesting. I think you get a unique kind of combination of abilities that synergize interestingly well together and just provide a comfortable experience throughout the whole game, with a lot of those kind of quality of life features that you really do like to have throughout your playthrough, kind of baked into one character. So let's talk about the build. We're going to be kicking things off as a Cleric. I wanted to play Cleric for this build, specifically Knowledge Domain Cleric. It's not a Cleric subclass that I build with very often, and it comes with a ton of unique features that I actually really like for this build. It's a bit similar to things like Goo, Warlock, and such like that, or just the Bard class in general, where you get a lot of kind of, I would say, psychic-adjacent spells that on a Cleric can be really interesting, as well as a lot of different kind of flavor things that kind of make it sense for this build. Plus, it's wisdom-based, which synergizes nicely with the class that we're going to be taking a bit later. So with Knowledge Domain Cleric, you're going to get a few things. Number one, you're going to get Command and Sleep added to your spell list automatically, which is great. These are two pretty damn good spells to have in the early game. You're also going to get your usual Cleric cantrips. I've gone for Resistance, Guidance, and Thaumaturgy, like always, since I don't think we really need a ranged damage cantrip yet, but Produce Flame or Sacred Flame will work. As for our race, I've decided to play a Tiefling here, but you can play any race in the game. It really doesn't matter. Githyanki would probably be one of the best races to play with this build, and I totally agree, so feel free to go with that if you like, but I kind of wanted to build a Tiefling because I haven't in a while. To be fair, I've not built a Githyanki recently either, but, foreshadowing. Anyways, with a Tiefling, you're going to get things like Dark Vision, your average movement speed, but also resistance to fire damage, which I think works quite nicely for us. I've gone for the Mephistopheles Tiefling sub-race, because they're the closest to, arcane magic, and I guess the closest thing to, intelligence-based spellcasting, I guess, because you get things like Mage Hand, which is always nice to have, and we wouldn't normally get this, so I wanted to pick it up. Because, again, playing this, knowledgeable arcane character that doesn't have Mage Hand, I mean, come on. It wasn't going to work out, so I like the fact that Mephistopheles Tiefling does give us access to this. As for your Cleric deity, it's really up to you who you want to pick here. I just kind of picked the knowledge dude, which is Ogma, which is the god of inspiration and invention, sharing knowledge with the world through his bards and clerics. Now, obviously, we put a slightly darker twist on this, because while we are willing to spread the knowledge that we get, the illegitimate knowledge that we get, the very, very illegal knowledge that we get, let's say, we are willing to spread that knowledge, but for you know, the right price. So it definitely puts a twist on the teachings of Ogma that is a bit more sinister, but I don't think I would see this character as outwardly malicious. They're just kind of a dickhead because they're selling people's information. Which won't happen to you with today's sponsor. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. Never, ever going to happen. Could you imagine a whole build like this and it's just an ad for a VPN? No, I would never. Moving on. As for our ability scores, they're going to look a little bit strange, but hear me out here. Strength is at 8 because we don't need it. Our main attacking modifier is going to be Dexterity, which is also going to work for our armor class. Constitution is at 15 because we are going to be bumping this up with a half feat later. Intelligence is at 10 because I certainly didn't want it at 8. Wish this could be higher, but our proficiencies and expertise are going to make up for that lower intelligence when it comes to passing skill checks. And finally, Wisdom at 16 as it is going to be our main spellcasting modifier as a Cleric. For skill proficiencies, I know the Sage background would probably have made the most sense for this build lore-wise, but mechanically, I went with the Urchin background to give us sleight of hand and stealth. I feel like both of these things are kind of important for what we're trying to go for here, this kind of like stealthy infiltration character, which, by the way, this build is very, very good at. So, with sleight of hand and stealth, you're going to be off to a good start. Arcana and History are... We gain Arcana from the, I believe, yes, the, give me a second. Where have we gotten Arcana from? It's from somewhere. I think it's from Knowledge Cleric. I don't know. Anyways, we have Religion, History, and Arcana granted from our class. We've put skill proficiency into History and Religion, as well as expertise into Arcana and History. You could take Insight, Medicine as well, or Medicine as well if you like here, but I like picking up Arcana and History, mainly because that makes sense, and we also get Religion. I don't know where some of those skill proficiencies have come from. Please let me know, because I've completely forgotten. Check. All still good? Are we all still good? Yes, we are all still good. Let's keep going. At level 2, I think for the proper progression for this build, I think we should absolutely start going into our next multi-class straight away. It's up to you if you want to prioritize the Cleric stuff or the stuff from Monk, which is going to be our multi-class a bit more, but I feel like if you want to play more into the martial side of things with this build, you're going to want to start taking your Monk levels now, as well as the fact that Monk is going to give us a few things that I really want for the stealth aspect of this build as well, and even with that one level dip of Cleric to start, we do have a lot of that kind of quality of life stuff that Cleric gives us, like guidance and such like that, as well as some spells to use regardless. So I think I like taking the Monk levels here early enough to kind of get them out of the way and then going back to Cleric, but if you kind of want to mix and mash, or you want to focus on the Cleric stuff first, entirely up to you. But my recommended build progression, just if you want to play a more standard character that probably would make more sense for most people to play, then Monk is going to do it for you. Speaking of, let's talk about what Monk gets us. Unarmored defense, martial arts dexterous attacks, allowing us to use our dex for our unarmed strikes, deft strikes, making our unarmed attacks stronger, and we get to make an unarmed strike as a bonus action, as well as flurry of blows to just absolutely punch someone over and over and over again. It's all the signature features of Monk. You all pretty much know what this does by now. Next up, we now get Patient Defense, Step of the Wind Dash, and Disengage. I love Patient Defense on this build, being able to make it so that attack rolls against us have disadvantage, and we also have advantage on dex saving throws. It just feels so good. The advantage on dex saving throws is going to be less important as time goes on, especially when we pick up the main armor piece for this build, but making it so attack rolls have disadvantage against us so that we're much harder to hit is going to be great. This build doesn't get the highest AC in the world. We end this build around 18, which is very serviceable, but Patient Defense is going to help with that. However, we will be able to supplement what Patient Defense gives us with equipment pieces later on, so we can free up our bonus action in those key points for other things. At this level, if you're playing a Mephistopheles Tiefling, you are going to get Burning Hands as well, but we're not really going to be using that because it's charisma based, and we don't have charisma. Next up, at level 3, we get to choose our subclass, and with the Stealth Infiltrator angle, you probably already know where I'm going with this, but we're going to be playing a Way of Shadow Monk today. Way of Open Hand, all 4 elements will both work. Obviously, Way of Hand is just stupid busted anyway, but Way of Shadow is going to be great for this build for what we're trying to do. It's going to give us the ability to hide as a bonus action, cast a Pass Without Trace, Darkness, and Silence, all all in this one level. It's really, really good. We are going to be getting another version of Silencer later that uses our spell slots, but the fact that we can choose to use key points or spell slots for a lot of our core spells is actually really nice. And Darkness is going to be a core centerpiece of this playstyle. We are going to do a little bit of Darkness shenanigans here, because that is going to be a very powerful way to approach this build if you need to get down and dirty in combat. But for the most part, we will be using other support spells if our party are going to be the one taking the brunt of what we're trying to do. But if we decide to infiltrate solo, being able to cast Pass Without Trace and Darkness to be able to get out of sticky situations when we're separated from the rest of the group is going to be super important. So we're definitely going to want to pick that up here. We also get access to Minor Illusion as a cantrip, which can help us distract enemies and allow us to slip by them unnoticed. Next up, at level 4, we're going to get access to Slowfall, giving us resistance to falling damage, which is always nice. At total level 5 as well, we're going to get Flame Blade, which I'm sure someone will find a use for, but probably not here. Next up, we do get to get a feat at this level, and it's entirely up to you what you want to pick here. At this point, you're going to have some equipment that is going to be boosting our dexterity up to 18. As you can tell from the armor piece here, you can probably guess what that is. So you don't really need to worry about boosting your dexterity here, unless you want 20 dexterity, which is totally viable. I would recommend bumping up our wisdom. This is going to help our monk features, it's going to help our AC, and it's going to help our spellcasting when we multiclass, when we go back to cleric, I should say, in a moment. So let's pick up wisdom for now. At level 5 of Monk, you're going to be getting access to extra attack, as well as the ability to use Stunning Strike with your melee actions, so either a melee weapon or an unarmed strike, which can possibly stun the target, meaning that they cannot take actions, bonus actions, or reactions. Now, the stunned status condition in this game is usually attributed to the Mind Flayer abilities, where they're able to use things like Stunning Gaze, which has an intelligence-based saving throw, and so I felt like getting Stunning Strike, in a weird way, kind of fits with like Psychic build vibes, and so with this type of build, it honestly just feels right at home. Being able to use your intense knowledge of like anatomy or something granted to you by the knowledge from your deity, just be able to strike pressure points and completely take an enemy out of commission for a little bit. I think it's a really interesting kind of way to like apply like a psychic spell, but with your fists, in a way, if that makes sense. You know what I'm talking about. It just fits nicely thematically for this build in a way that I didn't really expect. We're also going to be getting Cloak of Shadows, allowing us to become invisible if we are obscured. This is huge. Remember, we can actually make ourselves obscured by using darkness, so if for some reason we're standing out in broad daylight, we can still make ourselves invisible if we need to be able to slip away, as well as the fact that this can synergize when we're indoors, being able to slip by people undetected really easily. So, and, well, I mean, you're going to acquire this, let's say, intimate knowledge somehow, so yes, this character is probably just standing in the corner of your room watching you at all times, and you have no idea that they're even there. Yeah, this build's kind of fucked up, I'm not gonna lie. And finally, at Monk level 6, we're going to get two of the main things that I really wanted here. We're going to get access to key empowered strikes, allowing us to overcome resistance and immunity to non-magical damage with our unarmed attacks. We're going to get a bit of improved unarmored movement, meaning that we're a lot faster if we need to make a quick getaway, because somehow we've been spotted. But if we need an even quicker getaway, we've got Shadow Step, allowing us to teleport from shadow to shadow, as long as we are teleporting to and from an obscured area, which is anywhere that just has basically a light shadow on the floor. You can teleport like you have Misty Step as a bonus action for no resource cost, and you get advantage on your next melee attack roll after doing so. It's literally nothing personnel, kid. So overall, it's a great feature that's going to fit into like this almost like, I guess, like Knowledge Ninja vibe. The Knowledge Ninja. Seriously considering changing the name of this build now, but I won't, it's too memey. Let's move on. Moving back over to Cleric, we're going to start getting some more of our main knowledge features. Namely, now we're going to be getting Channel Divinity at level 2, which means we're also going to be getting Turn Undead, pretty standard ability, but not really something we're going to be focusing on here. Maybe I don't think I've ever really focused on Turn Undead in any of my builds, actually. Maybe that is a build worth building around. The build. That build, you know, the build. About Turn Undead, the build of the build, you know, that build? Yeah, that build. Anyways, next up we have Knowledge of the Ages, which allows you to gain proficiency in all skills of a chosen ability until your next long rest at the cost of your Channel Divinity charge. This is pretty damn good. I've done builds in the past where I've optimized this a bit further, being able to gain pretty much all skill proficiencies by level 4, one of my earliest builds actually, and it comes in clutch in a few different situations if you really just want to make sure you're going to succeed a certain skill check, so having this around is never a bad thing. Again, we've not really spec'd for it in this build. I mean, we haven't touched any of the charisma proficiencies yet, or a lot of the wisdom proficiencies, so charisma or wisdom would probably be pretty good. Unfortunately, we don't have a very high charisma score, but we could take something like enhanceability to give us advantage on charisma checks, as well as giving us proficiency in all of them, so you could kind of be a bootleg party face if you really wanted to. But knowledge of the ages isn't exactly a bad skill to have, it's just not one that we've necessarily built for here. But we can move on to our spell selection. So for our spells here at around level 2, you would have been able to pick some at level 1, but this is what I kind of would recommend to have at this point. Sanctuary is obvious. You can lay down a powerful concentration spell that helps to control the battlefield, like Darkness or something that we're going to be getting later, and then just cast Sanctuary on yourself, so you're very unlikely to break concentration on it. And thanks to the fact that we're going to have things like Patient Defense to help us with our dexterity saving throws, even non-direct attacks against us are still going to be pretty good. We'll have pretty good saves against them, I should say. Next up for your other spells, I like having Guiding Bolt as a solid range damage attack that deals radiant damage, which is very, very rarely resisted, as well as making it so we have advantage on the next attack roll against that target, or, well, ourselves or the party, so it's a pretty good support damage spell. You also have access to things like Necrotic Inflict Wounds if you want necrotic damage close range. The healing spells are also pretty good, and I think because we're going to be doing a lot of debuffing and like control with this build, I feel like Bane does kind of work, especially if you decide to take some of the Cleric levels a bit earlier on, and you don't really have a good concentration option yet, so Bane is pretty damn good for now. Next up at Cleric level 3, we're going to gain access to level 2 spells. As per our knowledge Cleric domain spells, we're going to gain access to Calm Emotions, okay, and Hold Person. Hold Person is one of the best control spells in the game, allowing you to completely immobilize a humanoid enemy, and any attacks against them that are close enough are always critical hits. So if we're up against a humanoid enemy that we really need gone, Hold Person, punch, flurry of blows, all that good stuff. You're going to get like 4 critical hits on them in a single turn. It's pretty busted with this build, so I really like Hold Person here. If there was a way to get Hold Monster, I'd be having that as well. We could get it if we went high enough into Knowledge Cleric, but I wanted the Monk stuff, obviously, so we're not going to be getting that as part of this build. I do have plenty of builds that do those, so go check those out. The other spells I would like to get my hands on are, well, there's some pretty decent options here. I would say we're probably going to be dropping Bane pretty quick now, as we are going to get better concentration options, but let's take a look at what we do have. And that's ability. Like I said, this could help if you want to pair this with Knowledge of the Ages to really make it so you're good at skill checks. But for now, the 2 that I want to pick up are Silence and Blindness. Silence kind of makes sense with the whole stealth and infiltration angle. Obviously, making yourself silenced means you're going to be better at stealth, as well as making it so enemies can't hear you coming either. As well as Blindness, the non-concentration option to blind a creature, meaning that they attack with disadvantage and you can attack them with advantage. Just an absolutely amazing spell to have in our arsenal. I would say, if you're more into punching at close range rather than using Inflict Wounds, I would replace that at this level with Spiritual Weapon. Spiritual Weapon just puts another extra bit of DPS on the board, dealing force damage, which again, not very often resisted, coming from a source separate from you, and you only need a bonus action to cast it. So I think it's actually a pretty nice addition to this build overall, even if at the end of the day all it does is it takes the heat off of you yourself for a little bit, so you can get to a better vantage point or something like that. But again, another non-concentration option for giving you a bit more to do on the battlefield. Basically, Blindness and Spiritual Weapon at this level, combined with things like Darkness from the Monk, is just going to make it so you have a very strong presence on the field that you and your allies can both take advantage of. Next up at Cleric level 4, we are going to be getting access to another cantrip. Choose whatever you like. I'm going to take Produce Flame because it's kind of Tiefling-esque, and we do get to prepare another spell at this level. I'm going to say Enhance Ability. Next up, we do get to take another ability score improvement or feat. Now, for your ability score improvements, let's have a look at what we've got going here. We have 18 Wisdom, and with our equipment, we're going to have 18 Dexterity. That's honestly as good as we really need it to be for this build, so I'm going to suggest another little pickup here now that we're a bit deeper into the Cleric levels. I want Resilient Constitution. Now, if you wanted to maybe play your stats a little bit differently, you could just take the Warcaster feat instead, which could work, But I quite like picking up Resilient here because it's going to give us a +1 in our Constitution, giving us a total of 16, which is going to give us a pretty decent health pool and good concentration saving throws, because now we are also proficient in those saving throws. Basically, you could, I guess, drop maybe a level of Cleric or Monk if you really don't care about their level 6 features to pick up a level of Fighter instead as your start and do things that way. But I kind of like getting Resilient here because I don't really take this feat very often, and it just lets me get some of the more unique features of both classes by going for a 6-6 split instead, and it still rounds out our stats pretty nicely at the end of the day. And again, the true optimizers in the audience will know how to use things like the Mirror of Loss or maybe potions of Hill Giant Strength or whatever to really get more damage or whatever out of this build. So, you know, this is just kind of like a nice middle ground option. I would say if you do go for Mirror of Loss shenanigans, definitely put that into your Wisdom, and if you really want a big power boost, go for the combine that with the giant potions to really just have an absolute massive bit of damage added onto your build. So, let's keep going. At Cleric level 5, we're going to get access to level 3 spells, and we get 2 pretty cool ones. We get Speak with Dead from our domain, which allows us to speak with the dead. A little bit lame considering you can get this necklace from Wither's Chambers right at the start of the game that lets you do this pretty much all the times you would need to anyway. So it's not a huge deal, but it's still nice to have. But Slow, on the other hand, I mean, I think anyone who's been on the channel long enough at this point knows how much I absolutely love this spell. In my opinion, it is one of the best battlefield control spells in the game. It targets up to 6 creatures and makes it so that they can only use an action or a bonus action per turn, not both. Their movement speed is heavily reduced, and their AC and dexterity saves are reduced by 2, meaning that both our spellcasting and our natural weapon attacks like our unarmed strikes are both going to do better against them. And if we really need to just get away from someone, we can Shadow Teleport away, and they just have no chance of catching up to us. They would have to dash and waste their action and blah 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 blah, unless they're a ranged character, in which case they're going to have trouble hitting us because of all of our extra MacGuffins from, you know, patient defense and all the other stuff that we'll be getting. And if we're in a cloud of darkness, which I guess we wouldn't be if we're concentrating on Slow, but you get what I mean, right? I mean, who knows, you may get darkness from a different source. Pair this with a Devil's Sight Warlock and you've got a pretty strong duo right there. But anyways, Slow is just going to be an amazing spell for this build, so I absolutely want to pick it up here. And as we all know, Cleric really does take off with its level 3 spell selections, to the point that I really don't know what to pick here. I think at this point I would replace Healing Word with Mass Healing Word, because I think overall it will just do a bit more for us if we desperately need that panic heal, but I don't think this build is really going to be about healing overall, so I might take the healing spells off here. I definitely want Spirit Guardians. We are going to be a melee character at the end of the day, and if you really do just need that extra damage and being able to run around the battlefield with our enhanced movement speed and just do a bunch of damage that way, then this will still work, although it is not the main focus of this build. Glyph of Warding is another great non-concentration spell that we can just place down, deal damage or status effects, be it sleep, force damage, detonation damage, like to push enemies away off of cliffs, thunder damage. It does a ton of stuff, and I absolutely love it. As well as we can pick up other spells here, like I said. I mean, I would probably just keep maybe the regular Cure Wounds, because I feel like Healing Word and Mass Healing Word, they're okay, but for this build I don't think they're going to be great, especially Mass Healing Word. We only go up to level 3 spell slots on the Cleric side with this build, and using those on the Mass Healing Word probably isn't going to be the best decision most of the time, so just having a way to just quickly Cure Wounds as an action and still be able to Flurry of Blows on a bonus action, I like that a bit more, but if you really don't care for the healing, then just pick something else. And finally, at level 6, we do gain access to a few things. Namely, we do get level 3 spells, another level 3 spell slot, so that's great for us. Another Channel Divinity charge, which means we can use our features a bit more. And we do get some more Channel Divinity features. We can get Read Thoughts, which allows us to just spend a Channel Divinity point to get Detect Thoughts, basically, and also Speak with Animals. Yeah, this is kind of lame, I'm not going to lie. Unfortunately, these level 6 things are not the best, which is why if you don't care about that second Channel Divinity point that can be spent on a few things, like I said, you may want to throw in another level or something here. This is probably where that fighter level from earlier could come in. If there's something maybe you want from like level 1 of Wizard or something like that, maybe if you want to do like Spell Scrolls and maybe get things like Shield and such like that. A level of Rogue wouldn't exactly go amiss here either, to get like some more skill proficiencies. Level of Bard for the same reason. There's a ton of level dips you could do here if you really want to kind of like experiment with stuff like that. Hell, maybe even a 1-level dip of Druid for some more wisdom-based spellcasting and still get to Speak with Animals could also work. Another version of this build that I kind of surmised could work is actually
Knowledge Cleric 7, Gloomstalker Ranger 5, which I also found to be somewhat effective, but I kind of want to stick with the Shadow Monk vibe, because I haven't done a Shadow Monk in a while, which is why I've gone for the build you can see here today. But like I said, there's many different ways to chop and change and move this build around the way you see fit, so please feel free to do so. And as for your other spell, you can take whatever you like. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is a little bit of everything. You got a decent amount of martial capability thanks to all of our monk features. You've got a ton of maneuverability thanks to the various monk features, like Step of the Wind, Shadow Teleportation. You have a bunch of stealth capability, being able to hide as a bonus action and turn yourself invisible, using the Darkness Cloud for both the front-facing fighting and infiltration. You have a bunch of ranged attacks for things like Guiding Bolt. You can shut down various different types of enemies, again with Darkness or Silence. You can make the whole team stealthy with Pass Without Trace. You can lock enemies down with Stunning Strike, and you can just debilitate your enemies with things like Slow, Hold Person, Silence, Blindness, and you can put a lot of damage on the field as well. And you even got a little bit of healing. Like, this build does a little bit of everything. Does it do any of these things as exceptionally well as something like a Who is doing that? Who is slamming doors in this house? Turning the sound effects off. Someone's out here slamming doors. I'm sorry about that, guys. Yeah, like I said, this build does a little bit of everything. But it doesn't do any of those things maybe as well as someone who directly specializes into things. It's not as good as Stealth of Infiltration as something like maybe a Rogue. It's not as good as Battlefield Control as something like a full Wizard. It's not as good at healing as something like a full Life Cleric. But it just does a little bit of everything, and it's a fun and interesting combination. I don't do Monk Cleric mixes very often. The last one I can think of was the Light Cleric Way of 4 Elements Fire-based Monk, which was also really fun. This is just kind of another way of approaching that similar concept. So I quite like this build overall just from a creative standpoint, but I can understand if it's not many people's cup of tea because it's not the most mechanically optimized. But like I said, it's still it does everything pretty good. It's just not Great Weapon Master or Sharpshooter or Tavern Brawler good, which not everything should be, because eventually it gets a bit boring. Let's move on to the rest of the build, the equipment. You have a lot of options for equipment with this build, but so I'm going to be going over a few different things that you could be picking up here and there. First up, our headpiece of choice here is the Hood of the Weave, giving us a +2 bonus to spell save DC and spell attack rolls. Because we haven't maxed out our wisdom modifier here, this is going to help out with a lot of our spell casting. Most of the time when I was testing, pretty much all of my spells had at the very least an 80 or above percent chance to land, especially things like slow, so this just helps us out quite a bit to make it so our powerful concentration spells are more likely to succeed. But in the early game, there's actually a fun little combination here, with the Hat of Uninhibited Kashiga. After dealing damage with an unarmed attack, the wearer gains a +1 bonus to their spell save DC until the end of their next turn. So until you get the Hood of the Weave in Act 3, you actually get kind of a fun piece of kit here that actually synergizes with this playstyle almost in an uncanny way. Like, the fact that Larian has this in the game, they must have known somebody was going to try Monk Spellcaster mixes, and I like that this exists. I mean, this was probably meant for Way of the 4 Elements, because I think that technically does have spell save DCs, but still, I really like this piece of equipment here. It just feels like this build was meant to be, in a way. Next up for our cloak, the Cloak of Displacement. Basically, it makes it so at the beginning of the wearer's turn, the cloak activates, granting enemies disadvantage on attack rolls against that wearer. This lasts until one of those attacks lands, then the effect dissipates. This basically serves as patient defense without needing to spend the key points. You don't get this until late in the game, so patient defense is going to work well until you get this, but then once you do get this is just another thing you don't have to spend your key points on, which is always good. Next up, the Graceful Cloth. The Graceful Cloth is probably going to be our main piece of equipment if we're going to be focusing more on the monk side of things. We're going to gain Cat's Grace, which allows us to have advantage on all dexterity checks, which is awesome. That's going to be great for sleight of hand checks for infiltration and our stealth checks as well. It also increases our dexterity score by 2 to a maximum of 20, giving us the 18 dexterity without having to put any points into it. We also gain a +1 bonus to dexterity saving throws, which is going to be great for when we have Sanctuary or something up and we need to be able to dodge a fireball, for example. So that is going to actually really help us as well. And it increases our jump distance, giving us a bit more maneuverability despite our lower strength. All in all, it's the one-stop shop for everything that this build needs, just to bring it up in a few different places. However, if you do want some other things, perhaps you're not using camp clothing like I am, and you, like most people, don't like the way this chest piece looks, you do have a few other options that could be fun. Sort of around the mid-game, you could get the Robe of Exquisite Focus, which just looks kind of nice anyway, and will give you a... damn, we're posing for it, apparently. Gives you a +1 bonus to spell save DC. I don't think I've ever included this robe in a build before, so I kind of just wanted to show it off because, well, hey, why not? The other kind of late-game option you could go for is the Shelter of Athkalta, which will give you advantage on all saving throws against spells, pretty nice, as well as the ability to cast Mirror Image, which I did think felt on theme for the build, so it's there if you want to grab it, but personally, I would say that the Graceful Cloth is the most powerful option for what we have here, so we're going to swap back. Also, by the way, this is the Citizen's Cap clothing mod, coloured with the Faerunian colours Misruled dye. Looks awesome. Anyways, moving on from that, for our gloves, I am using the Servitor of the Black Hand gloves, which, if I'm not mistaken, is a first for the channel. Your unarmed strikes deal an additional 1d4 force damage, which just kind of feels nice for this build anyway, but you also get the ability to cast Fear once per long rest, which is another kind of psychic control spell, which I like for this build, meaning that enemies will drop their weapons, becoming fearful, meaning they have disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls. So I quite like this. Feels on theme for the build, but there are some other options you can pick. This is a late game option, so an early game version of this would be the Gloves of Cinder and Sizzle. Basically swaps out that force damage for fire damage. You get this from the same vendor you get the Graceful Cloth from, and it gives you a casting a Scorching Ray. In the mid to late Act 2 kind of range, you can get the Haraknir Braces, which I featured on the channel recently. The Haraknir Braces will allow you to cast Mage Hand as a bonus action, as which we get from our Tiefling ability, so hang up, but we also gain another late level knowledge cleric spell that we wouldn't normally be able to get otherwise, which is Telekinesis. So basically Telekinesis is going to allow us to kind of throw enemies around. The only issue is it is going to use your strength for the spellcasting modifier, so I would pair this if you decide, I would use this if you decide to go down the Potion of Giant Strength route. That will make Telekinesis work exceptionally well, and the fact that this Telekinesis can be used every short rest, which is awesome because that means you only basically use it once, Telekinesis as a spell once per short rest anyway, when you have it normally, so you just basically have this infinitely. It's great. I really like Telekinesis here. I think it works great for this build, but again, only if you're going down that very specific route. Otherwise, these two gloves here will be the more generic option. And finally, the kind of the bog standard for all monk builds, the Boots of Uninhibited Kashigo, which allow you to add your Wisdom modifier to your unarmed strikes. We have a decent Wiz modifier, we have a decent Dex modifier, it's just more free damage. This is a late game option though, so for the other game I recommend, say it with me, the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, meaning that you cannot be enwebbed, entangled, or ensnared, and cannot slip on grease or ice, and you get to cast Misty Step once per short rest for free. The Misty Step here is really nice. We do already have a bit of teleportation, but we don't get that till kind of like the early to mid game, from level 6 of Shadow Monk, so this is a way to teleport without needing to get that feature, as well as it is still a slightly more reliable teleport that doesn't require you to be in an obscured area. Like I say, pretty much any time you're inside a building or just in an area with buildings that just cast shadows, you should be able to use Shadow Step, and again you can create your own area of effect for Shadow Step to at least get you started with Darkness, so it's not so bad, but having a usage of Misty Step can be quite nice. So you could also throw the Amulet of Misty Step on this build, for example, if you want something similar but still want the Boots of Uninhibited Kashigo. Next up, for the accessories, you have two options here. First up is the Amulet of the Devout, giving you a +2 bonus to your spell save DC. Combining this with the Hood of the Weave means that our control spells are basically always going to work. Pretty nice. As well as we gain additional use of Channel Divinity once per long rest. Usually our Channel Divinity recovers on a short rest, but we do gain an extra one that recovers on a long rest. And it's nice to have both our Channel Divinity and key points recover on a short rest, because it's nice to have our unique resources a bit more available to us. Otherwise, if you want to go for something a bit more monk-focused, you can go with the Sentient Amulet, giving you a casting of Shatter, which can be flavoured like a kind of Psychic Blast, as well as Key Restoration, allowing you to restore a number of key points equal to your martial arts die. So for us, that would be a decent amount, but not too much. And this also has a fun side quest kind of related to it, so I like picking this one up. Now, for the two rings that we have, they both fit this build really nicely. Number one, the Eversight Ring. We cannot be blinded, meaning that we're immune to the blindness condition inflicted by our own Darkness spell, allowing us to basically do Darkness Devil Sight stuff like Warlocks can normally do, just for the cost of a ring slot. And finally, we have the Shadow Cloaked Ring. The wearer's weapon and the unarmed strikes deal an additional 1d4 damage against lightly or heavily obscured creatures and creatures made of shadow. Again, with the Darkness spell, we can create lightly or heavily obscured areas, meaning that the creatures within them are lightly or heavily obscured, meaning that we always get this extra damage off. Overall, it's a pretty nice combo all the way around. The levels go together nicely, the equipment goes together nicely, and I like the playstyle of this build. It's meant to be a support infiltrator. And you'll see from the combat footage here, I'm up against some ballless cultists, because humanoid enemies is what this build does truly shine against. This build did okay in my testing against like my typical Steel Watcher encounters, but it definitely benefited more from having extra party members that could take the brunt of the damage, or like just distract some enemies a little bit to allow us to get our battlefield control set up, and once we were set up, it was game over. For the kind of level progression of this build, you are going to be playing this build pretty much as like a standard monk for the kind of early game, so it's not going to be too crazy. You're just playing a monk with some quality of life stuff from Cleric, which does feel pretty nice. But as you kind of level up and continue going throughout the game, you start getting the extra knowledge Cleric stuff, you're going to feel the more unique playstyle that this build provides come online, and it is going to feel pretty nice to play. But like I said, there's plenty of room for adjustments. Swap out Shadow Monk for Gloomstalker if you really want to kind of get sort of maybe a more weapon-based vibe. I would say pick up 2-weapon fighting and maybe try dual-wielding weapons. That could be really fun, like dual-wield short swords. Could be awesome. Or the archery style if you want to make it more bow-based. There's a few other things you could do as well, but I do kind of like the combo that we have here. But yeah, that is the build and that is the video. I don't really think there's much more to say here. I think I've covered pretty much everything. I'm thinking I might try a few things. Obviously tomorrow, oh no, I guess this video will be going up. I guess this video will be going up tomorrow, so today, it might be happening right now as this video goes live, in fact it probably will be, Heart of Avernus will be continuing. So if you didn't know that was happening somehow, I would have tried to have advertised it on the Discord and the YouTube channel. Heart of Avernus is happening right now, so if you want to make sure you catch the second part of that, which should be the final part, I hope, be sure to head on over to my friend Red Dog or Chaos or Gold. All of their streams will be streaming their perspectives, so feel free to check them out. Also, in addition to this, I do plan to try and do a live stream at some point this weekend. I know it's been a while since I've done a proper live stream, and I really want to get back into it. Specifically for one of the biggest live streams that we've all been waiting for, the finale to the Deity Build series, Building the Dead 3. Bane, Merkel, and Bull. I didn't forget his name for a second there. Shut up. And so yeah, that's going to be a really big stream. It's a stream that we've been waiting for. The longest running series on the channel will soon be coming to an end. I still have to do the Joaquin build before that the actual videos themselves get made. Might try and do that this weekend. Speaking of videos as well, I am going to be trying out a slightly new experimental style of video next week. Nothing that's going to be replacing my main content. If anything, it is going to be a bit of a bonus upload somewhere within next week. But I do want to try maybe starting to branch into those other styles of videos. It's not a style of video that I've particularly mentioned before, but I do want to give it a go and just see what you guys think about it. I will admit, it's slightly more YouTube-y content, if that makes sense. You'll know as soon as you see what the video is. But otherwise, I hope you guys enjoy that when it comes out, if I have time to get around to it, which I should. It's not actually that complicated of a video to make. I might just have to record a bit more combat footage than usual. Wonder if you guys can guess what it is. You might do. I don't know. But anyways, that is going to do it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.